Alright, hi. So I've abandoned this channel for about 7 to 8 months now because of school and college applications, but now that that's all done, I think I have some time to talk about what I'm currently reading. At the moment, I'm reading Simon Armitage's retelling of the Odyssey by Homer for National Poetry Month, and I don't think this requires much introduction. The Odyssey is one of the most popular and enduring stories in the world, and so it naturally follows that someone was going to rewrite it somehow at some point. Armitage is currently Poet Laureate of the UK, and he's also taught poetry at the University of Leeds and Oxford. And this was originally made for BBC radio dramas, and here he turns the Odyssey from epic poetry to epic dialogue, and he cuts down the poem to only what is spoken, not really the actions between characters. And it's divided into 3 sections, and while I've only finished the second one and have not started the third, I think it's worth talking about, especially since the story is so popular that I don't really think I need to go into much detail talking about the story. Armitage first translates the famous poem, which is the beginning of the epic, and then the rest of the work is pretty much the same as the Odyssey. He starts on Mount Olympus with the gods at council, and then he moves to Athena, visiting Telemachus on Ithaca, and then he goes to Odysseus on the island of Ogygia. And here, what Armitage does that I find really interesting is that he cuts out all the parts where Telemachus goes around traveling, trying to find more information about his father. He does include Telemachus planning to go off and travel, but he does not include the parts where he visits Nestor or Menelaus at Sparta. And I think it's a really good, subtle way of reminding the reader of whose story this is, which is Odysseus' story. Whenever you talk about the Odyssey, you often see people talking about, Xenia or hubris with the gods, Xenia being the Greek concept of the guest-host relationship. And I think it's important to talk about that within the context of the story, but it really is just Odysseus' story. It's a story about a man trying to return home to his wife and his son and his kingdom because he's been away for going on 20 years. And the hard part for him is that he has to deal with magic and monsters and idiot crewmates who foil them right when they're about to return. And he's just terrified of what he might return to. He might return to his wife married to someone else, or his parents are dead, which does happen. His mother does die. And when Odysseus goes to the Underworld to see the blind seer Tiresias, he sees his mother's ghost, and he's absolutely shocked. He can't take it. He breaks down in tears because he realizes just how long he's been away. When last he saw his mother, she was alive and well, and now he sees her as a ghost, and he can't even hold her anymore. And then he sees Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, who was murdered when he returned to Mycenae by his wife Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus. And then he sees the great warrior Achilles, who he saw die. And for Odysseus, this is just too much, and he breaks down in tears, and he has to be carried out of the underworld by Eurylochus and Polites. And really, I just think it's a great retelling of the Odyssey. Armitage does a really good job turning the story from poetry to dialogue. At one point in the story, Odysseus and his men get to the island where Helios, the sun god's cows are. And Odysseus tells his crewmates, don't eat the cows. If you eat the cows, we're screwed. And Eurylochus has the gall to challenge and argue with Odysseus about this, saying how tired they are, how long they've been away, and how much they just want to eat some good food. And Odysseus has to remind them that the only reason they're here is because they opened the bag of winds that Aeolus gave them. And if they want to return home, they should not mess up this opportunity and eat the cows. Or they should not eat the cows, pardon me. And I think this is a great example of why dialogue works for the Odyssey, because Odysseus hears Eurylochus tell him, complaining about how tired and hungry they are, but Odysseus kind of chooses to not listen. He says to them, we're in this mess because of you guys, and you all know who I am. Are you me? Are you Odysseus? And I think that's a great way of showing that Odysseus is a little bit of an arrogant person. He believes in himself way too much, even though it's justified. He's Odysseus. He's powerful and strong and the most cunning Greek of them all. And his men know this. They can't really argue with him because they know he's better than them. But all the same, they're still as tired and weary and homesick as he is. And Odysseus kind of misses that, even though he's technically correct in the fact that they shouldn't eat the cows, but they end up eating the cows anyway, and it just goes downhill for them. Odysseus lands on Ogygia, and all his men are dead because they ate the sun cows. But yeah, in general, I think this is a really, really good job of retelling the Odyssey. Armitage does a great job turning it from poetry to dialogue, giving some minor characters a little bit more depth and just interesting qualities to them. Or at least he makes them feel more alive, and it feels more grounded as a story. Like, for example, when Odysseus gets to Phaeacia, Queen Arete does not believe him. She almost wants to kick him out and spurn him from the castle, the palace. But gradually she comes to accept him and becomes convinced and sympathizes with him because Odysseus is a really good speaker. He's a really good storyteller, but he's also, been away from his from his hometown for 20 years now. And I just think it's a really good work. Armitage does sacrifice a little bit of the fantastical element and the more florid, poetic elements, like good examples being Wine Dark Sea or the rosy-tipped fingers of dawn, the more poetic elements of the Odyssey that people have used and have drawn from for generations. But in exchange for poeticism and fantasy, Armitage makes something that's a lot more grounded and feels all a bit more human in the end. And I think this is a common theme going on in his poetry, where he's really turning something that feels hard to understand or really abstract, and he makes it much more human and earnest and understandable in his work. And I just think he does that really well. But yeah, The Odyssey, retold by Simon Armitage for National Poetry Month. If I find some other poetry I think I'll talk about it, and I'll try not to abandon this channel again. But for now, have a good day.